How does your brain know what happens around you? Imagine you're walking through a park. You hear birds chirping, feel the warmth of the sun, smell fresh flowers, and see a dog playing. But how does your brain make sense of all these different experiences? It all starts with sensation, the way your body detects information from the world around you. When you see that dog, light enters your eyes, hits the retina at the back, and gets turned into signals that your brain understands. These signals are called neurochemical messages, which carry the information from your eyes to your brain for processing. Neurotransmitters like glutamate play a key role in transmitting these signals from the retina to the brain. But not every little thing you see, hear, or feel gets noticed. For something to be detected, it needs to reach a certain level called the absolute threshold, the minimum amount of stimulation you need to detect something at least 50% of the time. For example, in a quiet room, you might hear a whisper, but in a noisy place, that whisper might not reach your absolute threshold. Think about when you're in a crowded restaurant. You might not notice someone calling your name from across the room because the sound doesn't reach your absolute threshold due to all the background noise. But if you're in a quiet room, even a soft whisper can grab your attention. Now, if two sounds are almost the same, like two similar pitches, how do you tell them apart? That's where the just noticeable difference, JND, comes in. It's the smallest difference you can detect between two stimuli. For instance, if you lift two bags with similar weights, the JND is the point at which you notice one is slightly heavier. Here's a question. Have you ever adjusted the volume on your phone or TV? There's a point where you can barely notice the difference as you turn it up or down. That's the JND at work, helping you detect those tiny changes. Your senses can also adapt. If you walk into a room with a strong smell, at first, it might be overpowering. But after a while, you barely notice it. This is called sensory adaptation, your senses adjusting to constant stimuli. A common example is when you put on perfume or cologne in the morning. At first, the scent is strong, but after a while, you don't notice it anymore, even though others still can. Let's talk about your eyes again. Light enters the eye and is focused on the retina by the lens. The lens changes shape to focus light properly, a process called accommodation. The lens is flexible and controlled by tiny muscles called ciliary muscles. When you look at something up close, these muscles contract, making the lens thicker and more curved to bend the light more. When you look at something far away, the muscles relax, making the lens flatter. If this process doesn't work well, you might end up nearsighted, can't see far, or farsighted, can't see close. This process was first studied in depth by Hermann von Helmholtz, a 19th century physicist and physician who made significant contributions to our understanding of vision and perception. Ever wondered why older people often need reading glasses? As we age, the lens becomes less flexible, making it harder to focus on close objects, a condition known as presbyopia. The retina has two types of cells, rods and cones. Rods help you see in low light and detect shapes but not color. They're located mostly around the edges of the retina and are more sensitive to light, which is why they're crucial for night vision. Cones let you see in detail and color. They're concentrated in the center of the retina, in an area called the fovea, where they provide sharp, detailed vision. These cones are responsible for color vision, which is explained by two main theories, trichromatic theory and opponent process theory. Trichromatic theory states that there are three types of cones, one sensitive to red light, long wavelengths, one to green light, medium wavelengths, and one to blue light, short wavelengths. The combination of these three types of cones allows you to see the full spectrum of colors. This theory was first proposed by Thomas Young, later refined by Hermann von Helmholtz in the early 19th century. However, opponent process theory, proposed by Ewald Hering in the late 19th century, suggests that cones are paired in opposing pairs, red-green, blue-yellow, and black-white. When one color in a pair is stimulated, the other is inhibited. This explains after images. When you stare at a red image for a while, the red cones get tired, and when you look away, you see a green after image because the green cones are still fresh and react more strongly. After images were studied by Hering as part of his work on color perception. He noticed that staring at a bright color and then looking at a white surface often results in seeing the complementary color, which led to his development of the opponent process theory. This phenomenon also explains color vision deficiency, like colorblindness. For example, red-green colorblindness occurs when the red or green cones are not functioning correctly, making it hard to distinguish between red and green. Imagine you're in an art class. Your teacher asks you to stare at a red square for 30 seconds and then look at a white wall. You might see a green square instead. This is your brain using the opponent process theory to balance the overstimulation of the red cones. Your brain doesn't just passively receive this information, it actively processes it. For instance, when you hear a sound, your brain uses Weber's law to determine whether two sounds are different based on their relative difference, not absolute amounts. Ernst Heinrich Weber, a German physician and psychologist, first described this principle in the 19th century. But here's where things get really interesting. Imagine tasting a candy. You don't just taste with your tongue, you also use your nose. This is an example of sensory interaction, when different senses work together to create a complete experience. For example, when you have a cold and your nose is blocked, food tastes bland because smell contributes to the flavor. This interaction extends to many areas. For instance, the way something feels in your hand can influence how you perceive its taste or smell. Or the sound of music can affect how a certain food tastes. This is why some high-end restaurants pair music with meals to enhance the dining experience. In fact, research by Charles Spence, a professor at the University of Oxford, has shown that high-pitched sounds can enhance sweet flavors, while low-pitched sounds can make bitter flavors more intense. This is an example of cross-modal perception, where one sensory modality influences another, creating a richer overall experience. Here's a scenario to consider. Next time you eat chocolate, try listening to different types of music. Do sweet, soothing tones make the chocolate taste richer? How does heavy, fast music change the experience? Sometimes this interaction goes even further, leading to something called synesthesia. This is when one sense gets mixed up with another. For example, some people might see colors when they hear music, called chromesthesia. Others might taste words, where different words trigger different taste sensations. One famous example is the artist, Vasily Kandinsky, who reportedly saw colors when he heard music, which influenced his abstract art. Another well-known case is that of the author and neurologist Oliver Sacks, who wrote about a woman who experienced mere touch synesthesia. She felt sensations on her own body when she saw someone else being touched. Imagine you have synesthesia. What would it be like if you could taste the word apple every time you read it, or see a burst of color whenever you hear a violin play? Now let's talk about sound. Sound is just vibrations moving through the air. Your ears pick up these vibrations and your brain figures out the pitch, how high or low a sound is, and loudness. There are different theories to explain how we perceive pitch. Place theory suggests that different parts of the cochlea, a spiral-shaped organ in the ear, are activated by different pitches. High pitches activate the base, and low pitches activate the apex. Frequency theory argues that the entire cochlea vibrates at the same frequency as the sound wave, and the brain detects this frequency to determine the pitch. Volley theory is a bit more complex. It suggests that neurons in the cochlea fire in volleys, or groups, to match the frequency of the sound, especially for higher frequencies. George von Békésy, a Hungarian biophysicist, provided experimental evidence supporting place theory by demonstrating how the basilar membrane of the cochlea responds to different frequencies of sound. His work earned him the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1961. Think about when you're tuning a guitar. The different strings vibrate at different frequencies, and your brain uses these theories to determine whether each string is in tune. As you age or due to loud noises or earbuds, you might experience hearing loss. Conduction deafness happens when there's a problem with the ear's physical structures, like the eardrum or ossicles, the tiny bones that transmit sound. Sensory neural deafness occurs when there's damage to the inner ear, like the cochlea, or the brain pathways that process sound. An example of sensory neural hearing loss is damage caused by prolonged exposure to loud noises, which can harm the hair cells in the cochlea that detect sound. These are tiny cells in the cochlea, not our hair. Case studies, such as the famous example of Beethoven, who suffered from progressive hearing loss, illustrate the impact of hearing impairment on individuals. Despite his hearing loss, Beethoven continued to compose music, relying on the vibrations of the piano and his memory of sound. Imagine being at a loud concert without ear protection. Over time, the exposure to loud music might damage the hair cells in your cochlea, leading to hearing loss. That's why using earplugs is crucial in noisy environments. Your nose also plays a role in how you understand the world. Olfactory processing is the term for how your brain handles smells. Interestingly, smell is the only sense that doesn't first go through the thalamus, a part of the brain that processes sensory information. Instead, it goes straight to the olfactory bulb, then to areas involved in memory and emotion, like the amygdala and hippocampus. This direct connection is why certain smells can trigger powerful memories or emotions so quickly. A classic example of this is the Proust effect, named after the French writer Marcel Proust, who described how the smell of a Madeleine cake dipped in tea brought back vivid memories of his childhood. Research has shown that the entorhinal cortex, a part of the brain near the hippocampus, plays a key role in linking smells to memories. Think about the smell of freshly baked cookies. Does it remind you of your grandmother's house or a special time in your life? That's your olfactory system connecting with your memory. When you taste something like your favorite food, your tongue detects different types of tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, savory or protein, and even oleogustus, fat. Your tongue has taste buds, which contain taste receptor cells. These cells respond to different chemicals in your food, sending signals to your brain about what you're tasting. Some people have more taste receptors, making them super tasters, who experience flavors more intensely. The way taste and smell work together shows how much our senses are connected. Without smell, many flavors become muted. Cultural factors can also influence taste perception. For example, in some cultures, spicy foods are enjoyed regularly, and individuals from those cultures may have a higher tolerance for spicy flavors. The experience of intense tastes, like the spiciness from chili peppers, involves the trigeminal nerve, which also responds to sensations of temperature and pain. Imagine trying a new food. The unique flavors might taste strange at first, but over time you might grow to love them, as your taste buds and brain adapt to new experiences. Touch is a bit different. When you touch something hot, your skin sends a message to your brain, but it's not just one type of signal. For example, the feeling of hot is actually your brain combining signals from both warm and cold receptors in your skin. Now, think about pain. Pain isn't just about something hurting. It's how your brain handles it. Gate control theory suggests that your spinal cord acts like a gate, controlling how much pain gets through to your brain. For example, rubbing a sore spot can close the gate and reduce pain. There are also other theories about pain, like the neuromatrix theory, which proposes that pain is a complex experience influenced by sensory signals, emotions, and past experiences. For managing pain, methods like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which helps change the way you think about pain, or mindfulness, which helps you focus on the present moment, are often used. Advanced pain management techniques also include transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, TENS, where electrical currents are used to stimulate nerves and reduce pain, and biofeedback, a technique that teaches people to control physiological processes, like muscle tension, to manage pain. Here's a question. If you've ever stubbed your toe, did you notice that rubbing it helped lessen the pain? That's gate control theory in action, where the pain signals are distracted by rubbing. Some people who've lost a limb still feel pain in the limb that's no longer there. This is called phantom limb sensation. It happens because the brain's map of the body still includes the missing limb. So when the brain sends signals to the limb, it expects to get a response. When there's no response, the brain might interpret this as pain or other sensations. Neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran developed a treatment for phantom limb pain using a mirror box, which helps rewire the brain by creating the illusion that the missing limb is still present and can be moved. Imagine losing an arm but still feeling as if it's there. The sensation could be so strong that you feel pain or itching in the limb that no longer exists. Ramachandran's mirror box technique helps trick the brain into thinking the limb is still there, which can relieve these phantom sensations. Finally, ever wonder how you keep your balance while riding a bike or walking in a straight line? Your brain gets help from the vestibular system in your ears and the kinesthetic sense, which helps you know where your body parts are without looking at them. The thalamus plays a broader role in sensation. It's like a relay station for most sensory information. It receives signals from your senses, except smell, and sends them to the appropriate part of the brain for processing. For example, visual information goes to the occipital lobe, while touch information goes to the parietal lobe. Sometimes, when certain brain areas don't function correctly, it can lead to disorders. For instance, prosopagnosia, or face blindness, occurs when the part of the brain responsible for recognizing faces, the fusiform gyrus in the temporal lobe, is damaged. Another disorder, blind sight, happens when someone can't consciously see, but can still respond to visual stimuli, due to damage in the primary visual cortex. Imagine meeting someone and not being able to recognize their face, even though you know who they are. That's what it's like for someone with prosopagnosia. On the other hand, blind sight shows how complex vision is. Someone can navigate a room without consciously seeing it, because their brain still processes the visual information on some level. Real-life applications of our understanding of sensation and perception are vast. For instance, virtual reality, VR, relies on accurately mimicking sensory experiences to create immersive environments. Understanding how the brain processes visual and auditory information allows designers to create VR experiences that feel real, even though they're entirely artificial. In art, knowledge of color theory and how the eye perceives color is used to create specific effects in paintings and photography. The use of complementary colors, for instance, can make images pop and evoke strong emotional responses. Here's something to think about. Next time you play a VR game, notice how real it feels. That's because the designers have tapped into the way your senses and brain work together to create a seamless experience. So how does this all relate to behavior? Simple. Your brain takes all this sensory information, processes it, then tells you how to act. If you see a car coming, you step out of the way. If you hear your name, you turn to see who's calling you. Your brain is constantly making sense of the world by filling in blanks, combining signals, and even tricking you sometimes. In a way, your perception is a bit of a creative work by your brain, not just a simple reflection